Hi class. Okay, I'm back. Professor Brennan here for my interpersonal communication class. We are continuing our discussion about verbal communication. This will be part 4. We had just left off talking about subjectivity, and now we are going to discuss context. Okay, let's go to, let's see, that one right there. Okay, what do we mean by context? Remember, context is a situation. If something's situation, context defines, we're still talking about how we use words in verbal communication. So context defines a lot, has a lot to do with how we understand what things mean, right? So it's a setting or environment in which communication is taking place, and it influences how we interpret what's being said, the meaning of what's being said, and the appropriateness of what's being said. And I've been talking about this. In fact, this part will be short because I've given you so many examples in the previous recordings about what this means. Context is everything. How you talk in the classroom versus what kind of language you'll use when you talk to your friends, how you understand each other, how you use like texting language. You know, when you talk, you'll say, oh, JK. Well, that's so texting language, or LOL. Think about that. What does that even mean? Like, texting language is becoming a whole other language, but it's context of how you would speak to. Would you actually say that? Talk to someone of authority that way? Maybe you would, depending on how comfortable you felt with that person, but you probably would talk that way with your friends. So contextually bounds mean jargon. In organizations and academia, we have jargon that we have, SLOs. You guys don't know what that means, but in academia, it means student learning outcomes. But when we say SLOs, we know we're not talking about San Luis Obispo. We know exactly what we're talking about, right? Education is notoriously known for all kinds of acronyms. So there's jargon that in organizations, there's jargon within different companies, slang. I consider the text language like slang, and expressions of affection, right? What do you call the person that you love? You know, sometimes I call my wife Boo. In my past relationship, when I was married to a man, he called me his wifey, right? So we have different ways of expression. It depends on the circumstance. It depends on the context, the relationship that we have with that person. So now we've talked about rules, verbal communication. It's one characteristic is the rules around it, right? We talked about the different kinds of rules, constitutive and regulative. We talked about the symbols. They're abstract and concrete, denotative and connotative. We talked about the subjectivity of it. And now finally, we've talked about the context. Now let's get into gender and communication. So we're going to look at same-sex conversation topics, the similarities and differences. So conversation topics between women and then the ones between men. And let's look at where they're similar and where they're different. Women are more likely to talk about things that are intimate or personal, relationships, health, weight, beauty, appearance, things about their person that are like have to do with them individually and personally. Okay, that's usually, in fact, that can happen. Women will talk about that, women who don't even know each other. You're in a doctor's office and you'll end up having some conversation about like, what's your nail polish, or I like your hair color, right? Women will easily talk about things like that. Women are supposed to be known for gossip, but actually gossip is focused on family and friends, generally speaking. And then women also talk about sex and sexuality, dating. Okay, so women talk about those things. Now, you're going to find it pretty interesting because men, usually the things that they talk about are current events, sports, business, music, but they also gossip too. My ex-husband used to always love to hear about the gossip about between sports stars, what's happening in the sports world. You know, when Kobe was alive, what's happening with Kobe Bryant? He was a Celtics fan, and probably still is a Celtics fan. And he loved the Celtics and I love the Lakers. And he loved to know about who's dishing what and who's saying what, and he followed all that stuff. He was really into that. So men like gossip, they're just gossiping about something else. So remember that, ladies. When the men think that you're the only ones that gossip, men gossip too. Men also talk about sex and sexuality. Men talk about dating. And I have a little clip here that I'm not going to take up the time in my class right now, but I want you to watch it. This is a clip between Jerry and George from Seinfeld, and they are talking about the time when it's a great clip. You guys have to watch it. I love it. But they're talking about the time when Jerry and Elaine slept together. It is hilarious, hilarious. And it says so much about how men talk about things. And even how when a man gets more serious about the woman that he's seeing, of how he won't talk about certain things anymore. Like when you talk about details and when you stop talking about details, right? Okay. Same-sex communication patterns. So what's the pattern in which we're likely to talk about the things that we always do? Patterns means is like an ongoing thing that we do. We talk about talking is the essence of a relationship. So in order for women, especially to have relationships, we have to communicate with each other. It isn't just about hanging out. We are really about the talk. And it is part of who we are as women. So I'm talking about women biologically and gender. It's part of how we're socialized, but it's also considered a need. Now, men, their conversations tend to be more about things that are fun, not too serious, joking or teasing. I would suggest that, and I'm talking, these are mostly heterosexual examples, but even in lesbian relationships, there's definitely like women still follow that thing of talking, needing to communicate with each other. And men um, are more comfortable just not talking about anything too serious. Oftentimes in heterosexual relationships, men will talk to other women, maybe their women friends or their wives or their girlfriends, about things that are more serious. They're more comfortable doing that. Communication happens because they have a good time, they enjoy it. Let me go back there. This is one of the things, I don't know about the women that I'm talking to right now, that you think about why it's fun to hang out with your men friends, because men are more lighthearted about a lot of things. And it's not to say that men don't have their pressures in life, because they do. A lot of pressures that women have, and different pressures, right? But men haven't been socialized to be serious about certain things, and it can be really nice to be about around your men friends, whether they're your gay men friends or your straight men friends or whatever. There's something nice because there's a lightheartedness about that sometimes women tend to be more serious. Okay, gender differences in conversational styles. So how we talk. Women ask more questions that are relational. We're more likely to ask people questions about I don't know, either like getting advice or ask things about people's relationships. We're more likely to make statements of support, like I really want to help you, or I understand where you're coming from. And men are generally like more task oriented, like wanting to, and think about this. This is often a complaint in heterosexual relationships, that women want to be understood and just heard, and men want to get something done. Men want to do the task. How can I help you? Let me solve the problem. Again, maybe this will help you start to appreciate what you each bring to the table, right? You bring different things to the table and different habits or gender preferences. gender styles to the table. Like a man does want to solve a problem and isn't been really socialized to learn how to just listen. And maybe women can learn how to be like get to the point quicker, right? It's how we can then meet each other in the middle, but realize these differences are there. And how can we understand each other rather than being mad about it? Oftentimes, this is a result of like a communication conflict that people have. So maybe we can think of that differently. My gosh, we are done. I can't even believe that. So, hopefully, what you got from this whole verbal communication is looking at how much our gender, where we grew up, how we grew up, who we grew up with, in what context did we grow up. All of those things affect one, how we talk, how we communicate with other people, how we conduct ourselves, but what we say to people, what we think we can say to people, what we think we can't say to people. How do we see people in authority? How do we see people uh, below us, whatever that means? People that are in service to us. All of those things and how we talk to people is related to, again, to that subjectivity piece, right? Her historical narrative, our, I'm going to pull the exact thing. The lens of our personal experience, our historical narrative, our cultural upbringing, and our current lived experience, current lived community experience. All those things influence how we communicate. So keep that in mind as you move through this class and as you move through your relationships with others. Consider that there are so many pieces. And if you recall, when we first entered this class, I talked about how messy communication was. And remember, all this stuff is happening at the same time, which is really exciting, but really messy. Be empathetic. Use your emotional intelligence. I know you have it. Until next time, we'll see you later.